me come tonight to present. I'm really excited. I was very, very happy to do this because, as a therapist, we own our own businesses. This is a picture of the office space that I have. I had recently expanded. My husband also owns a small business, a general contracting company, and he and I together built a space that we built out for other clinicians. So we rent space to other therapists. We also have therapists on staff. So we're kind of in this small business stressful event with you all. So, we've also had to hear like how to pivot and how to make like very difficult decisions. So it's something that's very close to my heart. And I recognize that how important it is like for the stability of people's families to kind of cope with what's going on. And especially with the lack of like data and algorithms, it really creates a big sense of anxiety. So my goals for tonight were to normalize your experience, help you identify if there's any markers of distress, like if there's any sort of response that is maybe too intense or creating some sort of difficulty in your life where you may need, to check in with a therapist or kind of talk to your healthcare provider. And lastly, I wanted to kind of give some cognitive strategies to help you soothe your mind so that you can be in your best space to make decisions. Because keeping our mind tidy is what will be the most helpful thing in this situation. So first, let's go over some of the common emotional responses to COVID-19. So I'm sure some of you have already heard this, but just to kind of go over it, one of the biggest responses right now is chronic fear and existential dread, which, it's so difficult to predict when will this end, when will there be a vaccine, and that impacts us all so greatly. So that can, create like a hyper anxiety in many of us. And anxiety thrives in uncertainty. So this can manifest in a lot of different ways, like catastrophic thinking, negativity bias, emotional reasoning. Behaviorally, this can present as hypervigilance, rigidity, irritability, nervousness, restlessness. And it can definitely affect your sleep, make you feel, some people feel palpitations or feel like you're having a panic attack, and even nausea. Also, I just kind of want to point out that a lot of times people try to nail down, like, I feel just this way. We're allowed to feel different feelings at the same time. So like a lot of times there's like a duality. There can be relief about something, and then there can also be dread. So, allowing yourself to feel a multitude of feelings at the same time is really important. Another big one, which I'm sure many of you have also heard, is that there is a grief response going on, and that is the emotional suffering that we experience when we lose something or someone we love. But right now, it's not just the big things that we're losing, we're also losing kind of like these micro transactions where we just get to show up somewhere on time, and that feels really good. Or you go to the coffee shop and you leave an extra dollar, and it kind of reminds yourself like, oh, I'm a good human, I'm okay. Like, we're just losing a lot of transactions that ground us and make us, and just kind of remind us, like, even if you show up at like your kid's drop off and you see a bunch of people and you're friendly, like that feels so good. And we're just missing a lot of that. Which kind of also actually, let me talk about how that can manifest, because that can also look like a lot of depressive features that can be, hopelessness and a loss of interest, mood swings, and it can also be agitation, excessive crying. So grief comes in a lot of, there's a lot of different stages of grief, and sometimes each stage manifests symptoms differently. So it has a like array of presentation and symptoms. And sometimes people can become isolated in that, which is the last one I wrote there, which is loneliness and isolation. It's really interesting because social distancing has made it so hard for us to access our community, which would help normalize our experience. And that's exactly what we need. So it's not only is it that we can't be near some of our family members or our communities, but we're also like not able to build up some of the other like safe structures that we really need right now. All of these things and anything that you're probably feeling right now is completely appropriate and normal. Like, this is a really stressful event. So for you to have stressful feelings makes complete sense. But what we want to do is we want to make sure you are not judging your own emotions or kind of doing what's called like spectatorship or emotional perfectionism. Sometimes I'm hearing people say things like, oh, well, if I was just a little stronger, I could probably handle this. Or like, why am I freaking out about this? And so that just adds an extra layer of emotion and exacerbates whatever original emotion is there. So if we're angry at ourselves for feeling anxious, you know, it has now increased our anxiety and it has given us two like fronts basically that we need to kind of work through. So we really want to create a space where we're not judging our response. It is extremely stressful and you want to allow yourself to kind of acknowledge how you feel, whatever that is. If it's anger, you know, maybe it's an emotion that you have stigmatized, like, I don't want to be angry about this. I think you want to let yourself connect to what am I really feeling? It's okay to feel this way. I'm not going to judge this feeling. I'm going to have some compassion. And then that will help you really confront the actual emotion that you're dealing with. So I think we really want to have a good understanding that we're not doing the emotional perfectionism. So staying away from kind of, I can't handle this, or if I, was stronger, I'd be able to do this, or I couldn't figure it out, and that what's wrong with me. Like those types of thoughts are not helpful. Sometimes a rule of thumb would be if you wouldn't say this to a friend or a child, don't say it internally to yourself, because we tend to be our own worst critics and the hardest on ourselves. And we really want to tune into that inner narrative and make sure it's kind. Okay. So the next thing that I kind of thought might be helpful for this group is to talk about worrying and the concept of worrying. Because what I think a lot of people don't recognize is that worrying can be really disruptive, but a lot of people see it as an attempt to problem solve. So they see a value in worrying. And then what happens is that the worrying gets out of control because it turns into what's called rumination. So we want to maintain the balance of, we want to feel like we are being responsible and we are worrying about something that's extremely important to us, but we don't want to be flooded by the worry. So you want to maybe understand your personal relationship to worrying. Are you attempting to problem solve? Or is this anticipatory? Like, are you trying to protect yourself from a negative feeling? So you are, going through every single worst case scenario because that might feel like, and then I'm prepared if it happens. But again, that is creating an emotional response in your brain about something that has not happened yet, but you're still experiencing it. So you really want to look at, how much am I worrying about something? Am I worrying for multiple hours a day? Am I actually landing on anything new in my worrying? So I think if you can connect to your own pattern and then also be more mindful of like, how long am I actually doing this? And then how much of this is constructive? You may want to identify, again, like striking that balance of what would be an appropriate amount of worry so it could be 15 minutes a day. It could be for some people an hour. And you could even like schedule time for unstructured thoughts where you let your mind go wild. Like think of every worst case scenario, however you want to prepare yourself, think of all the emotions. You can do that, but then it's like almost a hard stop, because if you continue to do it, it becomes more disruptive than helpful. So we really want to work on decreasing, some of the worrying, because it's just the same thoughts like over and over and over again. Okay, so another thing that might be very helpful is that a lot of us have cognitive distortions, which are exaggerated or irrational thought patterns that create emotional distress. And I'm going to go over just a few. There's a lot, but I thought like maybe some of these might resonate with you. So some of us kind of do what's called all or nothing thinking, which is we see things in very black or white categories. Like nobody will come if I open my doors. If something falls short of perfect, it's a failure. And so this kind of stuff really creates a lot of anxiety. And so we want to watch out, how are we really thinking about stuff? Another big cognitive distortion is overgeneralization, which is you see a single negative event as kind of like the evidence of a pattern, like, and you'll use the words like always or never, like, oh, it'll never work out if I do it this way. So it's not really an accurate kind of depiction of what's going on, but your mind is kind of like making these big generalizations about what's going on. Mental filter and negativity bias is when you pick out a single negative detail and then dwell on it so exclusively that you're only seeing the negative. So it could be something like, well, I don't have X, and like I think that some of my competitors have X, and like so it won't work out, or like you see that as some sort of indicator or proof of, you know, failure, or that some sort of evidence like maybe it won't work out. And negativity bias is kind of like when you overestimate the like negative and you underestimate the positive. So you're kind of having a skewed idea of how things are really going to conceptually play out, because you're kind of dramatizing the negative, like, oh, it's going to be disastrous. Another really popular one is fortune telling, which is kind of obvious, but like we interpret things negatively when there are no facts to support this. That's kind of like this type of arrangement will never work, although maybe it has never even been proven. And a lot of these things are just creating emotional distress. This is a big one, and I think emotional reasoning is really common. Emotional reasoning is when you assume that your negative emotion is the way things really are. So if something like, I feel scared, therefore something scary is happening. And a lot of times our feelings and our reality are not congruent, and we might feel like something is scary, but it actually is not. And that happens a lot of time. I once had a client who would say, feelings are not facts. And I think that's kind of like an interesting thing sometimes to just park in your brain. You know, oh, I feel like this is just never going to work out. Like, that's not real evidence that something is not going to work out. And again, these thoughts don't serve you, and they just create like an internal narrative that's really stressing you out. So, you know, in cognitive behavioral therapy, you know, there's actually, this list is actually a lot longer, but I thought these might be some that would resonate. We want to identify where these things might be coming up, because some of them are so subconscious. We do it so automatically. We don't even recognize when we're doing it. So, you know, we kind of want to, if you start feeling like some distress, it could be evidence that something like this is going on, that you're thinking about it in this way. And what we want to do is like pinpoint the thought and then try to ask maybe how we can reframe. And some of the questions we could use are, is this thought all true? Like, is it really 100%? I could prove this in the court, like 100% going to happen, or could there be other, you know, explanations? And that kind of goes into this, like, are these facts or an overestimation of what's going on? Is it a fact that everybody who comes might get coronavirus? No. Is it an overestimation? Most likely. So did these thoughts help me? Like, how did these make me feel? Are these scaring me? Are they making me want to shut down? Or are they inspiring me and coaching me through something? Again, do these thoughts harm me or help me thrive? That's kind of based on what I just said. This one's interesting. Are there any other things that would have to happen before this could become all true? And that's basically like, a lot of times our minds fast forward to like a really negative outcome when there's so many other small things that would actually have to happen before this really large, like, troubling thing happens. So you kind of want to be able to, again, remind yourself, like, I fear this big, maybe, you know, disaster, but at the same time, like, if one of the fears is like, someone's going to come into our program and maybe they're going to test positive, like, there's a lot of other things that are going to happen, like, you know, people having symptomatic behavior, like, you're going to be more prepared than you probably realize. Okay, are there any concrete thresholds that I can put in place? This is kind of also helping you monitor your worry. Like, why are we worrying before something happens? Like, can I look at something like very specific, like, you know, kind of like if there's a symptom, then I start to worry. But if that's not really present, you know, is this really going to help me? Or again, am I working this up? I thought this quote was a little helpful. A human being is a deciding being. Because right now in the small business culture, it feels like we're just faced with so many decisions and they're all really, really stressful decisions. So what I want to say is that when we are anxious, our brain is hijacked, right? And like it's our limbic system is in control. And we're kind of in this constant fight or flight mode. And then we cannot access our prefrontal cortex, which is helping us with like reasonability, let's see, like intuition, like you want to be as reasonable and calm as possible so you can make the best decisions, right? If your mind is too like revved up, it's going to be really difficult to kind of make a thoughtful evidence-based decision, which I think in business is super important. So we really want to take care of your brain. So some of the tools that I thought might be helpful, let me just go back to my notes. Okay, is kind of, you could create a self-care or a wellness regimen. Sometimes these things are helpful because right now there's so much a sense of like a loss of control that for small things that we can control, predictability, some sort of knowability is really, really helpful. And you can kind of do that in the realm of like self-care and wellness, which is, you know, going for walks in the park, kind of being connected to nature, like that can be really helpful, or whatever's your thing. If you like to cycle, like you can do something like that and you can do it. You have control over that, which can be really helpful right now. Other things that might be helpful, and like, again, I'm saying all these things because besides the excessive worrying and the cognitive distortions, I think when your mind is revved up, we want to calm it down so that you can address the cognitive distortions. So these are just some ideas. A digital diet might be very helpful. Watching the news a lot can be really stressful. Social media, comparing ourselves to others, kind of seeing how things are going. Like sometimes, you know, if you are logging off and not feeling good, you may want to rein it in a little bit because again, like, is this helping or harming? And then the news right now is really stressful and it's also constantly evolving. So what we hear at 9 a.m. sometimes is different at 9 p.m. So you may want to say like, okay, I check in, you know, maybe a few times a day, but maybe if there's like a chronic, like watching Twitter all day, see how you feel and then maybe kind of play with how much you're taking in. Sleep is really important. In therapy, we talk about sleep hygiene a lot, which is attempting, I know it can be hard, is to go to sleep the same time every day and try to wake up the same time every day. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep, the suggestion is actually after 15 minutes, it's to get up and do something very boring, like paperwork or something, just like organizing something maybe in your house, and then try to go back to sleep. And you don't want to overstimulate your brain. You want to do something that kind of resets the cycle. You're most likely have been worrying or anxious, and we want to help break that and then try again to go back to sleep. There's also some great relaxation techniques that you could use to help you go back to sleep. And I can help maybe send that out after this. There's one called the Benson technique, which has really been helpful for people. Because if we wake up and our minds are ruminating and worrying, it stimulates our brain because it upsets us. And then again, we go into, I want to solve this. I want to fix this. I can't tolerate this. And that's actually keeping us awake and harming us more than helping. Some people, we all hear meditation, that can be really helpful. Mindfulness, gratitude, perspective taking. So the mindfulness can really come in, I think, when the mind feels really hijacked, like, am I safe right now? What's another way to look at this? How am I feeling? That can be soothing for some people. And that is something we can try. Breath work, there's great things online. People really think like if you have the proper technique, you're really calming down your nervous system, and that can also be really helpful, especially for stressful moments. Attempt to expand or access the community. So I think all of you are already doing such a great job doing that. Like that's why you're on this listserv and in this small group, and like having a cohort can be really helpful. Yeah, and if there's anything like maybe specific to what you do, like for example, like I'm on a specific for therapist listserv and then a parent listserv, I think any way that you can feel like you're expanding your community and how to access like experts in your field can be really helpful right now. Some other self-soothing skills is always to appease your senses, which is like scented baths, light a candle, a hot shower, maybe tasting something, listening to something that really kind of soothes your mind. And maybe always having those at the ready, like so that it's not like, oh, I'm really stressed out, then what do I do? You may want to create that toolbox so that you can always access those things when you need them. Like it's a moment of distress, it's like, I know what to do. And also, I think one other thing that I was thinking about specifically for this group is that many of you are here because you've had these tough decisions to make for your business. And the funny thing is that you are successful business people and you can't forget that. And so to kind of take that inventory that when the environment allowed, you did really great. And you couldn't predict this was going to happen, but that's not any evidence about who you are as a business person. So it's like kind of helping yourself feel more grounded in your own intelligence and resilience and kind of trusting, oh, right, I'm that person who's going to navigate this. Because a lot of times, when something stressful happens, we don't really see it so clearly and it feels so personal and it's so stressful. So you really want to like remember kind of and ground yourself and center like, oh, right, like the evidence suggests that I am the right person to make this decision and I am capable. It's just a difficult decision. And I already kind of spoke about this one before, which is creating structures and routines that help contain the anxiety. And that can be different for every person. So when to seek additional help, something that I think is important to recognize is that, at least in my own practice, like I'm always looking at intensity and frequency of emotions. So it's not so much sometimes that people have a wrong emotion, it's more about the intensity of their emotion. So right now to feel stress, the stimulus is really stressful. But I think if we're at like a 10, that can be really troublesome. So we're looking at, are you, a 10 when you could be a 4? And then frequency is like you can have a bad day, sometimes a few bad days or a week. But if you're having more and more and not able to recover, something else might be going on. So some things to look for besides that, and I have a list here. Appetite or sleep disturbances, rapid mood swings, your mood, you're really, really down, and then maybe you're up. Feelings of hopelessness or suicidal thoughts. I mean, that suicidal thoughts, you have to immediately go to the emergency room. Urges to self-harm, which could be, even binging and purging, cutting, sustained loss of interest in activities, increase in substance use that's maladaptive. So if people are relaxing and having a glass of wine more than usual, that's not the same as maybe drinking way too much and then not able to function the next day. So you want to look at what is your typical routine and like how has it changed. And then there's some like somatic things like it's like psychomotor, like you're restless or you're very vigilant and tense. And then there's the somatic manifestations such as headaches, body aches, pain, or palpitations. And so if that is the case, you may want to speak to your healthcare professional. And I'm happy to open it up for any questions. If I can expand on any of these theories, I would be happy to do so. Thank you.